On a warm summer evening in downtown Miami, the rumble of motorcycles filled the air outside the Blue Pit, a popular local hangout known for its mix of characters from all walks of life. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the parking lot where a group of leather-clad bikers had gathered, their chrome-plated machines gleaming in the fading light. These weren't your typical troublemakers, they were the Road Kings, a group of motorcycle enthusiasts who'd earned respect in the community through their charity rides and youth mentorship programs. But tonight, something was different. The usually laid-back atmosphere was charged with tension as their leader, known simply as Thunder, had his pride wounded by a newcomer who'd walked in wearing a flashy gold chain and designer clothes. The stranger stood at 6 feet 4 inches, built like a mountain, with shoulders that seemed to barely fit through the doorway. Nobody recognized him, but there was something familiar about his confident stride and the way he carried himself. The local regulars watched with a mix of curiosity and concern as Thunder approached the massive figure. "Hey, big shot," Thunder called out, his voice carrying across the now quiet establishment. "You've been throwing around some big talk about how bikers are just wannabe tough guys. Care to back that up?" The challenge hung in the air, heavy with the weight of wounded pride and territorial instinct. What Thunder didn't know, what none of them knew, was that their challenger was none other than Big Shaq, the former WWE wrestling superstar. But this wasn't the showman they'd seen on TV, this was Shaq in his downtime, trying to enjoy a quiet evening away from the spotlight. He'd made a few offhand comments about motorcycle culture, not realizing how deeply it would offend the proud Road Kings. The tension in the room grew as other patrons slowly backed away, creating a clear space between Thunder and Big Shaq. The bar's owner, a weathered man in his 60s who went by Pop, watched nervously from behind the counter. He'd seen his share of confrontations over the years, but something about this one felt different. "Look, brother," Shaq began, his deep voice resonating through the room, "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I respect anyone who's passionate about what they do." He raised his hands in a peaceful gesture, but Thunder was too caught up in the moment to back down. The other Road Kings formed a loose circle around them, their leather vests adorned with patches telling stories of 1,000-mile rides and brotherhood. Among them was Doc, a former emergency room nurse turned biker, who watched the situation with growing concern. He'd treated enough injuries to know how quickly things could go wrong. Thunder stepped closer, his face inches from Shaq's chest. "Respect? You come in here, running your mouth about how we're just playing at being tough? That's not respect, big man. That's asking for a lesson in humility." What happened next would become the stuff of local legend. Instead of responding with aggression, Shaq broke into his characteristic wide smile. "You know what? You're right. I spoke without understanding. How about this, instead of fighting, why don't you show me what being a Road King is really about?" The unexpected response caught Thunder off guard. He'd been ready for a fight, not a conversation. The other bikers exchanged glances, unsure how to proceed. Pop let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding, and a few of the regular patrons began to edge back toward their seats. "You're serious?" Thunder asked, suspicion evident in his voice. "You want to understand our world?" "Dead serious," Shaq replied. "I've performed in front of thousands, but I've never experienced the freedom of the open road your way. Maybe I judged too quickly. Teach me." This moment marked a turning point, though none of them realized it yet. What started as a potential brawl was about to transform into an unlikely friendship that would challenge preconceptions on both sides. The Road Kings were about to discover that their antagonist was not only a former wrestling superstar but a man whose heart matched his imposing stature. As the night progressed, the initial tension gave way to something unexpected. Thunder found himself sharing stories of cross-country rides, of brotherhood forged through rain and shine, of the real meaning behind each patch on their vests. Shaq listened intently, his earlier comments forgotten as he gained a new appreciation for this tight-knit community. Unknown to the bikers, this encounter would lead to a series of events that would change their lives forever. But for now, they were just beginning to understand that sometimes the biggest misunderstandings can lead to the most meaningful connections. The following morning, the Road Kings gathered at their usual spot, a small diner called Sunrise Grill, where the owner, Miss Betty, had been serving them breakfast for over a decade. The events from the previous night were still fresh in their minds as they sipped their coffee and shared knowing looks across the worn Formica tables. Thunder sat at his regular booth, absently stirring his coffee while Doc and the others discussed their unexpected encounter with the gentle giant. None of them had recognized Big Shaq at first, but after a quick internet search on someone's phone, the revelation had spread through the group like wildfire. "Still can't believe we almost got into it with a WWE legend," chuckled Tank, the youngest member of the Road Kings, his plate piled high with pancakes. "My little brother used to watch him all the time. Would have killed me if I'd gotten into a fight with his hero." The bell above the diner's door chimed, and heads turned in unison. To everyone's surprise, there stood Big Shaq himself, having to duck slightly to clear the doorframe. He was dressed more casually today in a plain black t-shirt and jeans, but his presence was no less commanding. Miss Betty dropped her coffee pot in shock, but thankfully, Doc's quick reflexes saved it from shattering. The elderly woman's face lit up with recognition, and she hurried over to greet their famous visitor. "Well, I never thought I'd see the day," she beamed, pulling out her order pad. "What can I get you, honey? The breakfast special's real good today." Shaq smiled warmly, but his eyes were scanning the room for the Road Kings. When he spotted Thunder, he made his way over, pulling up a chair at their table. The metal creaked in protest under his weight. "I meant what I said last night," he began, his voice carrying the same sincerity from their previous encounter. "I want to learn about your world. Maybe even ride with you guys, if you'll teach me." Thunder exchanged glances with his fellow riders. Teaching someone to ride was one thing, but finding a motorcycle that could handle Shaq's size would be another challenge entirely. Yet, there was something about the former wrestler's genuine interest that made them want to help. "First things first," Thunder said, pushing his plate aside. "We need to find you a bike that won't look like a toy under you. I've got a buddy who customizes bikes for bigger guys. He might be able to help." What followed was an unexpected journey to Big Red's Custom Choppers, a warehouse-turned-workshop on the outskirts of town. The owner, a mechanical genius known for his innovative designs, took one look at Shaq and saw it as the ultimate challenge. "Now this," Big Red grinned, walking circles around Shaq while taking mental measurements, "this is gonna be interesting. We're talking custom everything, frame, suspension, the works. It'll be a masterpiece." As Big Red sketched out initial designs, the Road Kings shared stories of their most memorable rides. They told Shaq about the time they escorted a wedding convoy through a thunderstorm, about midnight runs to deliver supplies to homeless shelters, and about the annual toy drive they organized for local kids. "People see the leather and the bikes and think they know who we are," Doc explained, showing Shaq photos on his phone. "But being a Road King isn't about looking tough. It's about being there for each other and for our community." Shaq listened intently, occasionally asking questions that showed he was genuinely interested in understanding their perspective. He shared his own stories too, about the pressure of performing in front of thousands, about using his fame to help others, and about the importance of breaking down stereotypes. As the day progressed, Big Red's sketch evolved into a detailed plan for a custom motorcycle that would become known as the Giant's Chariot. The design incorporated reinforced framework, adjusted ergonomics, and subtle styling that would match the Road King's aesthetic while standing unique. "It'll take a few weeks to build," Big Red explained, showing them the final design. "But when it's done, it'll be unlike anything else on the road." While they waited for the bike to be built, Shaq began spending more time with the Road Kings. He showed up at their weekly meetings, learning about motorcycle safety, road rules, and the intricate hand signals they used while riding in formation. The locals got used to seeing the basketball player turned wrestler at the diner, sharing laughs with the bikers over Miss Betty's famous apple pie. Word spread through the motorcycle community about the unlikely friendship forming between the Road Kings and the WWE star. Other clubs started showing up at their gatherings, curious to see for themselves. What they found wasn't a celebrity looking for attention, but a genuine soul eager to learn and become part of their world. Thunder, who had been the most skeptical at first, found himself impressed by Shaq's dedication. "You know," he said one evening as they looked over Big Red's progress photos, "when you first walked into the blue pit, I thought you were just another outsider looking down on us." Shows how wrong first impressions can be. Shaq nodded thoughtfully. "That's the thing about stereotypes, they work both ways. I had my own prejudices about biker culture, but you guys showed me what it really means to be part of something bigger than yourself." As the sun set on another day, the Road Kings and their new friend gathered outside Big Red's shop, looking at the partially completed motorcycle that would soon carry Shaq on his first ride. The anticipation was building, not just for the bike's completion, but for the adventures that lay ahead. Little did they know, the story of their unlikely brotherhood was about to take an even more interesting turn, one that would test their bonds and challenge everything they thought they knew about loyalty, friendship, and the power of breaking down barriers. 3 weeks into the build, Big Red's shop buzzed with unusual energy. News channels had gotten wind of the story, and reporters started showing up hoping to catch a glimpse of the famous wrestler-turned-biker apprentice. The Road Kings formed a protective barrier around their new friend, keeping the media circus at bay while Big Red worked his magic on the giant's chariot. "Never thought I'd see the day when my little shop would be on the evening news," Big Red muttered, making final adjustments to the massive custom handlebars. The bike was taking shape, a magnificent machine with a reinforced frame, custom-sized seat, and modified controls to accommodate Shaq's unique proportions. Thunder watched from his usual spot by the workbench, tossing a wrench from hand to hand. "Fame's a double-edged sword," he observed, noting how Shaq seemed more comfortable in their company than in front of the cameras. "But we've got your back, big man." The afternoon sun filtered through the shop's dusty windows when an unexpected visitor arrived. A sleek black SUV pulled up outside, and out stepped a man in an expensive suit, Randy Cooper, a prominent fight promoter known for his flashy events and bigger paydays. "Big Shaq." Randy called out, spreading his arms wide as he entered the shop. "Been looking all over for you, champ. Have I got an opportunity for you?" The Road Kings tensed, but Shaq motioned for them to stay calm. He'd dealt with Randy's type before during his WWE days. "Picture this," Randy continued, his voice dripping with enthusiasm. "A pay-per-view special event, bikers versus wrestlers. You leading one team, Thunder leading another. We'll pack the arena, maybe even do a motorcycle showcase beforehand. The publicity alone would be worth millions." The silence that followed was deafening. Even Big Red stopped working, his wrench suspended mid-turn. Thunder's face darkened, and Doc shook his head in disappointment. Shaq stood to his full height, towering over Randy. "That's not what this is about," he said firmly. "These people are my friends, not a circus act for your entertainment." Randy wasn't used to rejection. "Come on, think about it. You could all be stars. Reality TV deals, merchandise, the whole package. Everyone loves a good rivalry story." "But that's not our story," Thunder interrupted, stepping forward. "Our story is about breaking down walls, not building them up for profit. About finding friendship in unexpected places." The promoter looked around the room, realizing he was fighting a losing battle. "You're making a mistake," he warned, pulling out his business card. "The offer stands if you change your mind. Think of the opportunities you're passing up." As Randy's SUV disappeared down the street, Big Red emerged from behind the giant's chariot, wiping his hands on a shop rag. "Well, boys, I think it's time for some good news. She's ready for her first test run." The motorcycle stood gleaming in the late afternoon light, a masterpiece of engineering and artistry. The custom frame was painted in deep metallic blue with subtle gold accents, matching the Road King's colors while maintaining its own identity. The seat was specially contoured to support Shaq's frame, and the controls were positioned for optimal comfort and control. "Now remember," Doc cautioned as Shaq approached the bike, "we start slow. No showing off until you've got the basics down pat." The next hour was dedicated to teaching Shaq the fundamentals, starting the engine, finding the friction point on the clutch, and understanding the bike's weight distribution. The Road Kings watched with pride as their newest member took his first wobbly attempts in the shop's parking lot. "Keep your eyes up, look where you want to go," Thunder called out, jogging alongside as Shaq made wider and wider circles. "That's it, you're getting it." As the sun began to set, Miss Betty showed up with dinner for everyone, her famous meatloaf and fresh-baked rolls. They gathered around Big Red's workbench, sharing food and stories while Shaq couldn't take his eyes off his new ride. "You know what this means," Tank said between bites. "Time to plan your first real ride with us. There's this beautiful coastal route we take on Sundays, perfect for beginners." The conversation turned to route planning and safety preparations, but was interrupted by the sound of motorcycles approaching. A group of riders from a neighboring club pulled up, having heard about the custom build. Their leader, an older rider known as Ghost, approached with respect. "Heard about what happened with Randy," he said. "Wanted you all to know you've got our support. What you're doing here, bringing people together instead of dividing them, that's what riding's really about." The evening turned into an impromptu gathering of riders from various clubs, all sharing stories and offering advice to Shaq. The parking lot filled with bikes of all makes and models, their chrome gleaming under the street lights. As night fell, Thunder pulled Shaq aside. "You know, when you first walked into the Blue Pit, I thought you were just another outsider. But you've proven to be something else entirely. You chose friendship over fame, community over cash. That means something to us." Shaq smiled, looking out at the gathered riders. "In wrestling, we talk about family all the time, but this is the real thing. I'm honored to be part of it." The night ended with plans for Shaq's first group ride that weekend. As the riders departed one by one, the air was filled with the promise of new adventures and the warmth of genuine friendship. But none of them could have predicted the challenge that awaited them on that coastal route, a test that would prove the true strength of their newfound brotherhood. Sunday morning arrived with perfect riding weather, clear skies, mild temperatures, and a gentle breeze coming off the coast. The Road Kings gathered in the parking lot of Sunrise Grill, their bikes lined up in formation as Miss Betty handed out coffee and breakfast sandwiches to go. Shaq arrived on the Giant's chariot, his massive frame somehow looking natural on the custom machine. He'd spent every spare moment practicing in Big Red's parking lot, and his confidence had grown significantly. Still, a group ride along the coastal highway was a different beast entirely. "Remember what we practiced," Thunder said during the pre-ride briefing. "Keep your spacing, watch your signals, and if you need to drop back, Doc will stay with you." He pointed out the route on a well-worn map spread across his bike seat. "We'll take the coastal highway up to Rocky Point, stop for lunch at the lighthouse, then loop back through the mountain pass." The roar of approaching motorcycles announced the arrival of Ghost and his crew, who'd asked to join the ride. Word had spread about Shaq's first official run with the Road Kings, and the event had turned into something of a celebration. "Just like we planned," Doc reminded everyone. "Thunder leads, I'll ride sweep with Shaq, and everyone else maintains stagger formation. Keep the showboating to a minimum, this is about safe riding, not showing off." As the engines rumbled to life, Miss Betty came out with her ancient camera. "Got to document this for the wall," she insisted, referring to the collection of photographs that covered her diner's walls. The riders arranged themselves, with Shaq's towering figure in the center, all giving thumbs up. The group pulled out onto the highway, an impressive parade of chrome and leather. Local kids stopped their games to wave as the procession passed, and even the usually grumpy traffic officer at the intersection gave them a nod of approval. The first hour went smoothly. Shaq maintained his position, remembering to check his mirrors and signals just as they'd practiced. The Giant's chariot performed flawlessly, its custom modifications making it feel like an extension of his body. Then came the challenge none of them had anticipated. As they rounded a bend along the coastal highway, they spotted a school bus pulled over on the shoulder, hazard lights flashing. A group of worried-looking kids and their coach stood nearby, a high school basketball team returning from a tournament, their bus apparently suffering from engine trouble. Thunder gave the signal to slow down, and the group pulled over in perfect formation. The coach's eyes widened in recognition as Shaq dismounted his bike. "I can't believe it," the coach stammered. But you're on a motorcycle?" "Long story," Shaq grinned, already moving to check on the kids. "What's the situation here?" The bus driver explained that the engine had overheated, and they were waiting for a replacement bus that wouldn't arrive for at least 3 hours. The team had a crucial game that evening, one that could determine their chance at the state championships. The Road Kings huddled up, discussing options. Thunder looked at his watch, then at the map. "The lighthouse is only 20 minutes from here," he said. "They've got a landline since cell service is spotty on this stretch. Plus, Big Red's got a buddy with a garage in that town." What happened next demonstrated the true spirit of brotherhood that the Road Kings had been teaching Shaq. Thunder organized the riders into teams. Some would escort the bus driver to the lighthouse to make calls, others would ride to the garage to arrange for repairs, and the rest would stay with the kids to keep their spirits up. Shaq, naturally, stayed with the team. He shared stories from his basketball days, offered tips on technique, and even demonstrated some moves in the gravel parking area where they'd stopped. The kids were captivated, their bus troubles temporarily forgotten. Doc struck up a conversation with the coach, learning that many of these kids came from struggling families. For some, basketball wasn't just a game, it was their shot at a better future through college scholarships. Within an hour, help arrived in the form of Big Red's friend and his mobile repair truck. The problem turned out to be relatively minor, a blown radiator hose, and was fixed within 30 minutes. But the experience had transformed what could have been a simple ride into something more meaningful. Before the bus departed, Thunder pulled something from his saddlebag, a Road Kings bandana. He handed it to the team captain. "For good luck in your game tonight," he said. "Remember, champions help others along the way." The kids cheered as they boarded the bus, many of them taking selfies with Shaq and the bikers. As the bus pulled away, horns honking in gratitude, Ghost pulled up beside Thunder. "You know," Ghost mused, "some people might say we lost half a day of riding. But I'd say we gained something more valuable." The group continued their journey to the lighthouse, arriving just as the lunch crowd was thinning out. Over plates of fresh seafood, they discussed the morning's events. The conversation turned to organizing a benefit ride for the school's athletic program, potentially helping more kids like those they'd met. "See, this is what I was talking about," Shaq said, his voice carrying across the tables. "When I first met you all, I thought bikers were just about the tough image. But it's about being there for others, isn't it? About using whatever influence you have to make a difference." Thunder nodded, a hint of pride in his eyes. "You're getting it, big man. The bikes, the leather, that's just the outside. It's what's under all that counts." As they prepared for the return journey through the mountain pass, news came over the radio that a storm was moving in. Thunder studied the darkening sky, knowing they'd need to modify their route. But as they mounted their bikes, there was a sense that this day had already become memorable for reasons none of them had expected. The Road Kings had set out to teach Shaq about riding, but they'd ended up demonstrating something far more important, the true meaning of brotherhood, community, and being there for others in need. As they fired up their engines for the ride home, none of them could have predicted how these lessons would prove crucial in the challenges that lay ahead. Dark clouds rolled in faster than expected as the group left the lighthouse, turning the bright afternoon into an ominous twilight. Thunder gathered everyone in the parking lot for a quick strategy session, his experienced eyes scanning the threatening sky. "Mountain Pass is out of the question now," he announced, pointing to the heavy clouds gathering over the peaks. "We'll take the coastal route back, but we need to move fast. This storm's got bad intentions written all over it." Doc pulled up the weather radar on his phone, catching a signal before it faded. "Got a narrow window. If we push through now, we might beat the worst of it." Shaq felt the first fat raindrops hit his helmet visor as he mounted the giant's chariot. Despite his growing confidence, the prospect of riding in a storm sent a flutter of nervousness through his stomach. Thunder seemed to sense his concern. "Stay between me and Doc," Thunder instructed. "Keep your distance doubled in the rain, and no sudden moves. The giant's chariot is built solid, trust your bike and trust your training." The group formed up quickly, their usual relaxed formation tightening into a more defensive position. Ghost and his riders took up flanking positions, creating a protective envelope around their less experienced member. They'd barely covered 5 miles when the storm hit in earnest. Rain hammered down in sheets, while wind gusts threatened to push them into the next lane. The road surface, already slick with oil residue from the dry spell, became treacherous. Through the rain-streaked visor of his helmet, Shaq watched Thunder's tail light like it was a lifeline, remembering everything he'd learned about wet weather riding. The giant's chariot felt solid beneath him, its custom-built frame and balanced weight distribution helping him stay stable against the buffeting wind. Suddenly, Thunder's brake lights flashed red. Through the curtain of rain, they could see hazard lights blinking ahead. A small car had hydroplaned off the road, its front end buried in the muddy shoulder. Without hesitation, the entire group pulled over, using their bikes to create a protective barrier from passing traffic. Doc reached the car first, his medical training kicking in. Inside, a pregnant woman gripped the steering wheel, clearly in shock but apparently unhurt. Her husband, in the passenger seat, had a small cut on his forehead from the impact. "We need to get them somewhere safe," Doc shouted over the howling wind. "The hospital's too far in this weather, but I know a clinic in the next town, about 3 miles ahead." Thunder nodded, already formulating a plan. "Ghost, take half your crew and ride ahead to the clinic, let them know we're coming. Tank, you and the others set up a warning perimeter for passing cars. Shaq." He paused, studying the former wrestler's stance against the wind. "You're with me and document. Your bike's the most visible thing out here, we'll use that." What followed was a masterclass in precision riding. The Road Kings created a rolling safety corridor, with Ghost's crew clearing the path ahead and Tank's team protecting their rear. Thunder and Shaq flanked the couple's car, which Doc drove carefully while its shaken owners huddled in the back seat. Through the storm they rode, the giant's chariot's powerful frame breaking the crosswinds for the smaller car. Shaq found himself operating on instinct now, all his practice and training coming together when it mattered most. They reached the clinic just as the storm reached its peak. The staff had been alerted and were waiting with wheelchairs, quickly whisking the couple inside. Doc went with them to brief the medical team, while the others secured their bikes against the strengthening wind. In the clinic's waiting room, soaked but relieved, the group finally had a moment to process what had happened. The pregnant woman's husband, his head now bandaged, approached them with tears in his eyes. "I don't know what we would have done if you hadn't stopped," he said, his voice shaking. "When I saw all those bikes pull up, I thought, well, I had the wrong idea about bikers. I'm sorry for that." Thunder clapped him on the shoulder gently. "Don't worry about it. We're just glad we could help." A nurse emerged to announce that mother and baby were fine, just shaken up, and would be kept for observation until the storm passed. The sense of relief was palpable. As the adrenaline wore off, Shaq found himself surrounded by his fellow riders, all offering congratulations on his performance in the crisis. "Not bad for your first storm ride," Ghost grinned, wringing water from his bandana. "You handled that wind like a pro." "Had good teachers," Shaq replied, looking around at the group. "Though I gotta admit, this wasn't quite what I expected when I walked into the blue pit that night." Thunder laughed. "Life rarely is, big man. But that's what brotherhood is about, being there when the unexpected hits." The storm raged on outside, but inside the clinic, something remarkable was happening. Staff members, initially wary of the large group of bikers in their waiting room, began bringing them coffee and blankets. The husband shared his story of moving across country for a new job, his wife 9 months pregnant, trying to beat the storm home. Tank, using the clinic's Wi-Fi, found a news report about the high school basketball team they'd helped earlier. They'd made it to their game on time and won by a significant margin. The Road Kings bandana had been prominently displayed on their bench throughout the match. As night fell and the storm began to weaken, Doc emerged from the treatment area with good news. The couple would be discharged soon, and their car, though muddy, was undamaged and drivable. "You know," Thunder said thoughtfully, watching the rain slow to a drizzle, "days like this remind me why we do what we do. It's not about the bikes, the leather, or looking tough. It's about being there when we're needed." Shaq nodded, understanding now more than ever what it meant to be part of this brotherhood. The night's events had taught him more about being a road king than any amount of practice could have. Little did they know, their actions that night would have far-reaching consequences, leading to changes in how their entire community viewed the motorcycle club. But for now, they were content in the knowledge that they'd lived up to their values when it mattered most. The morning after the storm broke clear and bright, but the events of the previous day had already started rippling through the community. Local news stations picked up the story of the motorcycle club's rescue efforts, with amateur video footage showing the Giant's chariot and the Road Kings escorting the stranded couple through the storm. At Sunrise Grill, Miss Betty had to add extra tables as curious locals poured in, hoping to catch a glimpse of the riders who'd become overnight heroes. The diner's wall, already crowded with Road Kings photos, now featured a newspaper clipping about their storm rescue alongside the picture of Shaq's first ride. "Can't keep up with the coffee orders," Miss Betty chuckled, refilling Thunder's cup for the 3rd time that morning. "Though I suspect not everyone's here for my famous pancakes." She was right. Throughout the morning, people kept approaching their table, sharing their own stories of being helped by bikers on the road. An elderly gentleman recalled how a group of riders had changed his tire during a heatwave. A young mother told them about motorcyclists who'd helped her find her lost dog. But the most surprising visitor was Randy Cooper, the fight promoter, who walked in looking considerably more humble than during his last appearance. "I was wrong," he admitted, pulling up a chair. "When I saw that footage from the storm, I realized I'd completely misread what you folks are about. Instead of a wrestling show, how about we organize a charity event? Something that really shows what motorcycle clubs can do for their communities?" Thunder and Shaq exchanged glances. The idea had merit, especially if it could help change public perception of riding clubs. "Keep talking," Thunder said, pushing a cup of coffee toward Randy. As they discussed possibilities, Doc burst through the door, waving his phone excitedly. "You're not going to believe this. Remember that basketball team we helped? They're going to the state finals, and they want us there." The news brought cheers from everyone in the diner. The team had apparently credited their victory streak to the lucky bandana given to them by the Road Kings, and they wanted the riders to be their guests of honor at the championship game. Meanwhile, Big Red arrived with updates about the Giant's chariot's performance in the storm. "She handled beautifully," he beamed, spreading out some diagrams on the table. "Got calls from 3 other custom shops wanting the specs. We might have just revolutionized bike design for bigger riders." As the morning wore on, the diner became a hub of activity. Ghost and his crew showed up with a proposal for a multi-club charity ride. The pregnant couple from the storm, now safely home, sent over homemade cookies with a note announcing they wanted to name their baby, Kingston, in honor of the Road Kings. Local business owners started dropping by, offering support for future community events. The owner of the automotive shop proposed a free basic maintenance clinic for new riders. The high school principal suggested a motorcycle safety awareness program for students. Shaq sat back, taking it all in. Just weeks ago, he'd walked into the blue pit thinking he knew all about bikers. Now, he was part of something that was changing an entire community's perspective. "You know what this reminds me of," he said, addressing the crowded diner. "In basketball and wrestling, they talk about momentum, that moment when everything starts clicking, and you can feel the energy shift. That's what's happening here." Thunder nodded, understanding. "The storm just showed people what we've been doing all along. Sometimes it takes a crisis for folks to see past their preconceptions." The local paper's photographer showed up, wanting to do a proper story about the motorcycle club's community involvement. As they gathered outside for photos, someone noticed a group of kids on bicycles circling the parking lot, trying to imitate the riders' formation from the storm footage. Tank walked over to the kids, spending time explaining proper hand signals and safety practices. Soon, other riders joined in, turning the impromptu gathering into an informal safety clinic. "Now that's what I call positive influence," Randy remarked, watching the interaction. "Forget the wrestling angle, this is the story we should be telling." The day's events sparked a series of community initiatives. The Road Kings, along with Ghost's crew and other local clubs, began planning regular safety workshops, charity rides, and community service events. Big Red's shop became a hub for riders wanting to learn basic maintenance, with experienced members volunteering their time to teach newcomers. But perhaps the most significant change was in how people reacted to the sound of approaching motorcycles. Instead of tension, there was recognition. Instead of prejudice, there was respect. Late that afternoon, as the crowd at the diner finally began to thin, Miss Betty brought out a fresh pot of coffee and her special apple pie. "You boys remember when Thunder first started bringing the Road Kings here?" she asked, serving generous slices. "Some of my regular customers were scared to come in. Now look at this place, it's like one big family." Shaq smiled, remembering his own prejudices from just weeks ago. Amazing how things change when people take the time to look past the surface. "Speaking of change," Thunder interjected, "we've got some planning to do. That basketball championship game is coming up, and we need to make it special for those kids." As they began brainstorming ideas, involving everyone from local businesses to other riding clubs, it became clear that their story was far from over. The storm had been a catalyst, but the real transformation was just beginning. What started as a potential confrontation in a local bar had evolved into a movement that was breaking down barriers and building bridges across the community. And somewhere in the mix, a former WWE star had found a new kind of spotlight, not in the wrestling ring, but on the open road, helping to change perceptions one ride at a time. The week leading up to the state championship game buzzed with energy as the Road Kings, alongside other local riding clubs, transformed their regular meeting spot into planning headquarters. Miss Betty's diner had become command central, with maps, schedules, and lists covering every available surface. "So here's what we've got so far," Thunder announced, standing before the assembled group. "We're organizing a motorcycle escort for the team bus, coordinating with 3 other clubs along the route to the state finals. But we need something bigger, something these kids will remember forever." Shaq, who'd been quietly working his phone for the past few days, finally spoke up. "I might have an idea about that. Made some calls to my old NBA connections. How about we arrange for some professional players to come meet the team?" The room erupted in excited chatter, but Doc raised a practical concern. "The championship's in 4 days. Can we pull something like that together so quickly?" "Already done," Shaq grinned. Got 3 players confirmed. They're flying in the morning before the game. But here's the thing, I want to keep it a surprise for the kids. As they discussed logistics, Ghost arrived with unexpected news. The story of the Road Kings' connection with the high school team had caught the attention of a major sports equipment company. They wanted to donate new gear to the school's athletic program but had one condition: they wanted to film a commercial featuring the bikers and the team together. "Hold up," Thunder cautioned, seeing the excitement in the room. "We need to think this through. This isn't about publicity or making ourselves look good. It's about those kids." The group fell silent, considering his words. It was Tank who finally offered a solution. "What if we flip it?" he suggested. "Instead of a commercial about us helping them, make it about how they helped us break down stereotypes. Show how a bunch of bikers learned something important from a high school basketball team." The idea resonated with everyone. Even Randy Cooper, who'd stuck around to help with the event planning, nodded in approval. "That's the kind of story people need to hear," he said. "Not about tough guys doing good deeds, but about communities coming together and changing each other for the better." The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Big Red's shop became a staging area for bike maintenance, ensuring every machine was in perfect condition for the escort ride. Local businesses donated supplies for a pre-game rally. Miss Betty coordinated with other restaurants to provide food for what was shaping up to be a massive community event. The night before the championship, the Road Kings gathered for a final planning session. The usual rumble of motorcycles outside the blue pit was joined by the sound of excited voices as riders from various clubs came together to review their roles. "Remember," Thunder addressed the crowd, "tomorrow isn't about us. It's about showing those kids that they've got an entire community behind them. That when they look up into those stands, they're going to see leather and chrome mixed in with all the other fans." Shaq, who'd been juggling coordination with both the NBA players and the film crew, shared an observation. "You know what's funny? A month ago, I thought I was going to teach you all something about breaking stereotypes. Instead, you've taught me more than I could have imagined." The morning of the championship dawned bright and clear. The Road Kings assembled at sunrise, their bikes gleaming in the early morning light. The plan was to meet the team bus at the school and escort it to the state finals, with other riding clubs joining along the route. What they didn't expect was the scene that greeted them at the school. The entire parking lot was filled with people, parents, teachers, students, and community members who turned out to see the team off. Many wore Road Kings bandanas, matching the one that had become the team's lucky charm. The team's coach approached Thunder, looking emotional. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Yesterday, I asked the kids what they wanted to do with the prize money if they win. You know what they said? They want to start a scholarship fund for underprivileged youth, named after the Road Kings." The revelation hit hard. These kids, many from struggling backgrounds themselves, were already thinking about helping others. They'd taken the lessons of brotherhood and community service to heart. As the team bus pulled up, the atmosphere was electric. The players emerged wearing their jerseys, each one now sporting a small Road Kings patch alongside their school logo, a surprise organized by the coach and approved by the school board. Shaq pulled Thunder aside. "There's one more surprise we haven't told anyone about," he said quietly. "Called in a few more favors. The NBA's community outreach program wants to match whatever scholarship fund these kids start. Dollar for dollar." The escort began with a ceremony no one had planned but everyone seemed to know was right. The team captain and Thunder rode together at the front, leading a parade that grew larger with each mile as other riding clubs and community members joined in. Along the route, people lined the streets, holding signs supporting both the team and their unlikely allies. News crews captured the spectacle, but the real story wasn't about the media attention or the upcoming game. It was about how a chance encounter in a local bar had sparked a movement that was changing lives. As they neared the championship venue, Thunder reflected on the journey. The Road Kings had set out to teach Shaq about motorcycle culture, but in the process, they'd all learned something more valuable. They discovered that true strength isn't about physical power or tough appearances, it's about the courage to break down walls and build bridges instead. The day was just beginning, and the biggest moments were yet to come. The surprise appearance of the NBA players, the championship game itself, and the commercial shoot would all play their part. But somehow, everyone knew that the real victory had already been won, not on a basketball court or a motorcycle run, but in the hearts and minds of a community that had learned to look past the surface and see the truth beneath. The state championship arena was already buzzing when the motorcycle escort arrived. The rumble of engines drew everyone outside, where they witnessed something unprecedented: hundreds of bikes, led by the Giant's chariot, forming a magnificent honor guard for the team bus. As the players stepped off the bus, their jaws dropped at the sight of 3 NBA stars waiting to greet them, standing alongside Shaq and the Road Kings. The moment was captured by dozens of cameras, but the most precious shots were the ones Miss Betty took with her old camera, genuine expressions of pure joy and disbelief on the young players' faces. "This is just the beginning," Thunder announced to the team as they gathered in the parking lot. "Today isn't just about basketball. It's about showing the world what happens when people believe in each other." The team's coach could barely hold back tears as he watched his players receiving personal tips from professional basketball players. Many of these kids had never dreamed of meeting their heroes, let alone having them show up to support their championship game. Inside the arena, something remarkable was happening. The usual division between supporter sections had dissolved. Bikers in leather sat next to parents in business suits. School teachers shared snacks with riders sporting club patches. The equipment company's film crew captured it all, realizing they were documenting something far more significant than a planned commercial. Before the game, the team huddled in the locker room. Their captain held up the Road Kings bandana that had become their lucky charm. "Remember when our bus broke down?" he asked his teammates. "We thought our dream was over. But that day taught us something important: sometimes help comes from unexpected places, and sometimes angels wear leather instead of wings." The game itself was intense from the start. The opposing team was bigger, more experienced, and came from a wealthy school with state-of-the-art facilities. But there was something different about this underdog team, a confidence that came from knowing they had an entire community behind them. During timeouts, the NBA players offered strategic advice. The Road Kings led the crowd in cheers that shook the arena. Ghost and his crew organized impromptu drumlines using empty buckets, creating a rhythm that energized the whole stadium. As the final quarter began, the teams were neck and neck. The pressure was immense, but every time the players looked into the crowd, they saw their unlikely support system: hundreds of bikers on their feet, cheering their hearts out. With 30 seconds left and down by 1 point, the team's smallest player, a sophomore who'd almost quit basketball the previous year, stole the ball. The scene seemed to unfold in slow motion. He dribbled down court, just as they'd practiced countless times. The defense converged, but he remembered Shaq's advice about staying calm under pressure. The shot arced through the air as the final buzzer sounded. The arena held its collective breath. When the ball swished through the net, the explosion of joy was unlike anything the state championships had ever seen. Bikers and basketball fans hugged each other. The NBA players rushed the court alongside the Road Kings. In the chaos of celebration, Thunder noticed the opposing team looking dejected. He gathered the Road Kings and approached them. "Hey," he called out to their captain, "you played an amazing game. How about we give you guys a ride to the after-party? There's room for everyone in this family." The gesture captured the true spirit of what the Road Kings had been teaching all along. The equipment company's director was overheard saying they needed to completely rethink their commercial. This was about more than sports or motorcycles, it was about breaking down barriers and building bridges. Later that evening, at a celebration that spilled out of the blue pit into the surrounding streets, Shaq stood up to make an announcement. The NBA players were so impressed with what they saw today, they've decided to make this an annual event. Next year, they're bringing more players, and they want to help expand the scholarship program nationwide. The team captain then revealed their own surprise. They decided to name the scholarship the Thunder's Rhodes Scholars Program, honoring the man who'd first offered them that lucky bandana. Thunder, usually the toughest of the bunch, had to turn away to hide his emotion. Miss Betty, watching from behind her counter, put it best, "You know what's magical about all this? A few weeks ago, some folks in this town would cross the street when they saw bikers coming. Now look, we've got doctors and lawyers asking about learning to ride, kids dreaming about motorcycles and basketball, and a whole community that's remembering what it means to look past appearances." As the night wound down, Shaq and Thunder stood in the parking lot, watching the mix of people sharing stories and laughter. The Giant's chariot gleamed under the streetlights, no longer just a custom bike, but a symbol of how unexpected friendships can change the world. "You know what I learned?" Shaq reflected. "In the WWE, we tried to tell stories about good guys and bad guys. But the real story is about breaking down those labels completely. Every leather-clad rider, every kid with a basketball dream, every person in this town, they're all part of something bigger." Thunder nodded, looking at the Road King's bandana now framed on the blue pit's wall alongside the championship trophy. "And to think," he chuckled, "this all started because you walked into the wrong bar on the right night." The story of the Road Kings and Big Shaq didn't end with the championship game. It continued in the lives they touched, the scholarships they created, and the barriers they broke down. The annual basketball classic became a tradition, bringing together bikers and athletes from across the country. But more importantly, it lived on in the way people in town began to look at each other differently. They learned that strength comes in many forms, that family isn't always about blood, and that sometimes the greatest victories happen off the court and beyond the open road. As for the Giant's chariot, it remained a testament to what's possible when people choose to look past their preconceptions. And if you visit the Blue Pit today, you'll see a wall full of photographs telling this story, not just of a wrestler who became a biker, or of a team that won a championship, but of a community that discovered the true meaning of brotherhood.